All right, so we're talking about the World Wide Web, and we're going to talk about 5 things you can use when accessing the web. So we're going to talk about hosts and define what hosts are. And then, of course, there's URLs, browsers, search engines, and home pages. So we're going to go through each one of these individually. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the hosts. Hosts are basically computers connected to the internet. We talked a little bit about this on Tuesday. Computer is kind of like your box that's your gateway to the internet. Without the computer, you can't get on the internet, but with the computer just alone, you can't do much. They kind of go hand in hand. And then there's something called a server. Servers are wired to net hosts, and they are what gives users access to the internet. So not only do you have to have a computer somewhere, you've got to have a server as well. And probably the most famous server of all was Hillary Clinton's server that she had put in her home. It was a private server, wasn't hooked up to her government accounts, and people were worried that she was sharing confidential information over that server. And nothing kind of ever came of that, but that was the big news story at the time. And then a URL. URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator. And really, that's just a fancy way of saying what's the site's website address. So, Lincoln University's URL is lincolnu.edu. There are over 30 trillion unique URLs out there as of 2012. So that number has probably grown since then. More people tend to call URLs, instead of calling them URLs, they call them domain names. And anyone can get a domain name. Anyone can use a domain name, and you can use whatever domain name you want. However, you do have to pay someone for that domain name, to register that domain name and make sure no one else can take it. You have to pay for it, but it's really cheap. It's like $30 a year or something like that. Some of the top level domain names, typically you can use .com or .org as the end of your domain name, but typically .com is for business and .org is for nonprofit organization. And that kind of came along later as the internet started to get more popular. At first, kind of people used .com and .org interchangeably. And just to kind of keep an order to the system, we kind of came up with the idea, let's use .com for business and .org for nonprofit. And of course, as all of you I'm sure know, there's also .edu for educational institutions. And there's also .gov if you're looking at a government website. The Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, or ICANN, authorized the use of all generic top-level domains. So what some people did when the internet started to become popular was they went out and bought up a bunch of domain names, especially if it was for a company that they knew was popular. Like let's just say Johnson & Johnson. A lot of people went out and bought johnsonandjohnson.com, johnsonandjohnson.net, johnsonandjohnson.us, whatever they thought that Johnson & Johnson might want to use its domain name. They bought the rights to that domain, and the idea was that they were going to try to get Johnson & Johnson to pay them a crazy amount of money for domain names. And so a lot of people did this and kind of went crazy and just bought up everything. And so that's why this ICANN came along and kind of said, well, we're gonna rein this in. We're going to be the ones who authorize kind of the generic top level domains. So next we're going to talk about browsers. A browser is a software program that's loaded onto the user's computer, and it's used to download and view web files. So it's the little button you click on your home screen to take you to the internet. And some of the more popular browsers are Google Chrome, Firefox, and it used to be Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer is kind of going by the wayside a little bit, and a lot of times If you access a certain website, it will say that website is not compatible with older browser models. A lot of websites have, files that can't be read by the older models, so they'll recommend that you update your browser. One of the browsers we use at Lincoln that's kind of just automatically on our computer is Microsoft Edge. And ironically, even though it's what Lincoln University gives us all, you can't use Microsoft Edge to access Canvas, certain aspects of Canvas. So you have to use, like a Google Chrome for that instead. But what these browsers do is they take separate files, text files, image files, and sound files, and put them all together for viewing. So every time there's something on the internet, like an article with a picture and maybe a video with sound, those are all separate things that had to be built and put together, and then your browser interprets everything for you from the code and presents them to you. And then a little bit different from a browser is a search engine. So once you click on the browser and you're on the internet, a lot of times you might want to go to a search engine or software that allows you to navigate the internet simply by entering a search word and selecting a page from the results. And of course, the most well-known search engine is Google. And Google is so well-known that it actually is a verb now. It's saying, why don't you Google that? Or I can Google that information. Google is used in about 65% of all searches worldwide in a day, or about 3.5 billion searches a day. When you type something into Google, the search results that you're presented are ranked primarily on how frequently a given site is linked to others. So sometimes the top thing you'll get can change. And also, sometimes if you're looking for a specific organization and you type in the name of that organization, it won't necessarily be that organization that's the top result. And there are people that pay money to get their websites moved up in a Google search. Some other examples of search engines are Bing and Ask, but again, everyone knows Google. A homepage is part of a website, and it's basically the entryway to the site itself. It's when you put in that domain name and hit enter and you go there, it's the first page that pops up. Generally, sometimes a homepage is very generic, and it'll actually just have like a logo and a name, and it'll say click here to enter. Sometimes a homepage actually has information about the organization on it. But usually what it does is it has information and it gives you links to other material that are within that website and maybe even other sites. And everyone knows if you go to the internet and then something's in blue, then you can click on that and it's going to take you to a website. So a homepage can take you to other parts of the website that are still the same domain address, they just have a different ending on them. So if you go to like lincolnu.edu, that's going to take you to Lincoln University's homepage. But then lincolnu.edu/pages will take you to another part of the same website. Smartphones. So in 2013, more smartphones were bought than regular cell phones. And it seems like today that almost every cell phone is a smartphone. Even my mother, who cannot text or email or access the internet, has an iPhone to just make calls. But smartphones are now the most frequently used platform for sending and receiving email. So it used to be that people would send and receive email from their computers, and nowadays people usually send emails and get emails from their phones. And one of the things people like about that is that, you got your phone with you all the time. You can always be answering an email. 60% of all U.S. internet usage happens on smartphones. So more people access the internet through their smartphones than through a traditional computer. And I actually know quite a few students that don't even have a computer or a laptop. They just have a phone. When we went virtual in the spring, I actually had some students that were completing their homework assignments on their phone, which, is fine, but I could not imagine anything more frustrating, because there's been a couple of times I've had to use my phone to get like on a website and type some information in, and it's slow and it's clunky and it's so tiny, and I just could not imagine like writing a whole paper on my phone, but some people do it. Of all mobile web access, so all internet usage that happens on phones or tablets, 90% of it actually comes through apps. So when you get your phone or tablet out, there's the Safari button, which will take you to an internet, and then you can enter a domain name or you can click on a search engine. But most people are using the internet without ever actually going through the whole process of clicking on Safari and searching for something. They're getting it through the apps. The most popular app, even today, is Facebook, although Instagram is quickly gaining ground on it. I think Facebook tends to be more used because the old people still use Facebook, so there's just like more people out there that use it. But about 17% of people use entertainment apps, 16% use gaming apps, so that would be things like, the online games you always see, Candy Crush. Then there's messaging and social media apps, so that's outside of Facebook. So that's going to be, Facebook Messenger, that's going to be your YouTubes, your TikToks, your Snapchats. YouTube was about 3%, and I think that's going to be something that grows because YouTube's trying to kind of bust into the scripted television market, so I think it's going to become a little bit more popular. And then about 2% is done through news apps. So what is social media? When we talk about social media is a website that functions as an online community of users. So with social media, it has to be a group of people that are communicating with one another. And the idea of social media is that, to some extent, there's exclusivity. There are certain things you have to do to be part of the community. You have to set up a profile, and you have to ask for friends or followers or likes, and you can be rejected. So if you're accepted, if someone accepts your friend's request and your friend's online, then you are part of the community. You've been welcomed into the community. And a lot of people kind of supplant their online community for what the community they actually live in. But the very, very first social media site was something you guys probably had never even heard of. It was called Classmates.com. And Classmates.com was actually set up by people that were trying to put high school reunions together. So they were trying to keep track of people that they graduated with by inviting them to be friends on Classmates.com. And it would hook up people, who went to high school together. That morphed into a site called Friendster. And then in 2003, there was LinkedIn and MySpace. So MySpace was kind of like the precursor to Facebook. It was about an individual. And then LinkedIn tended to be more of a business site. I still get LinkedIn requests, even though I don't really use it at all. But that's like people are on there with their jobs. And it's a way for business people to communicate with one another. And it is a way to network. If you're ever looking for a job and someone gets your application, they'll probably, do a social media search for you. And on a lot of the social sites like Facebook and Instagram, there's privacy settings, so you can't always see everything that people posted. But on LinkedIn, that's kind of where people go to check out what schools you went to, what businesses you were in, what your job is. And then Facebook was developed in 2004, and I'm sure a lot of you know the story about Mark Zuckerberg and how he was going to Harvard, and these two guys approached him about this idea to form an online community that was supposed to just be for Harvard students and alumni. And the idea was it would be very exclusive because, it's kind of a small select group that goes to Harvard. And so he developed it, and at first it was just for Harvard students, but then it expanded to everyone in 2006. So it went global and everyone can use it. And even though it's fading in popularity, 90% of all Americans who are on social media are Facebook users. And again, it's a social media platform that boomers can figure out. So they like to get on there. And the thing about Facebook is you can even like delete your Facebook page, but it doesn't ever really go away. If you delete your page, they hold on to your information for you, so that if you ever want to come back, you can just click one button and everything that you had saved is still there. So they want to be able to keep you on the line. Facebook does collect nearly 70% of the world's social networking ad revenue, about $33 billion a year. So that's how Facebook is a valuable stock, even though it's a free application to use. They aren't making their money through users, they're making their money through ad revenue. And Facebook alternates with YouTube as the most visited website after Google. So think about how often Google is used. Google is used probably nearly daily by someone searching for something. And then number 2 is either Facebook or YouTube. So it shows how popular social media has become. In 2006, we had Twitter come out, and what Twitter specialized in was microblogging. So you could post, but you could only use up to 140 characters. And the idea was that tweets were supposed to be small little bursts of information. They weren't supposed to be big, long statements. But people have gone around that, and they just, if they want to say something that's, 500 words, they'll just send out multiple tweets. So not everyone necessarily uses Twitter as it was meant to be used. The tweets are displayed on a sender's profile page and delivered to their subscribers. So to see someone's tweets, you have to be following them. And the delivery of a tweet can be specific or public. So you can tweet at someone, you can tweet at a specific person, or you can just tweet in general to your page, and then everyone who follows you can see it. There's about 67 million active users of Twitter in the U.S., and they send about 500 million tweets a day. So that's about 7 or 8 tweets per person per day. And then something that's really grown in popularity is Snapchat. Now, when Snapchat started out, a lot of people were very suspicious of Snapchat because one of the features of Snapchat was you send a message and then it disappears after so many seconds. And a lot of people were like, well, what are you sending that needs to disappear so quickly? But it quickly became very popular, and it's like the primary way that teenagers and younger people tend to communicate with one another. And then, of course, there's Pinterest. So Pinterest is what I call the bored housewife website. It's people who, pin things that they like and come up with ideas for how to design their kitchen, or how to, certain recipes they like, or things like that. It tends to be very crafty type stuff. And then there's other social media sites that are dedicated specifically to a specific community. So Cafe Mom, obviously that's a social media site for moms. Black Planet, very similar. It's a social media site, but it's primarily for Black users. And Foursquare.
What's Foursquare?
I have never actually used Foursquare. No. So it used to be that when the internet was popular, email was what was used most on the internet. But in 2009, social networking took over. So when people use the internet, they're using social media more than anything else. 70% of all U.S. adults belong to at least one social networking site, and that's U.S. adults. So that doesn't even count people that are younger than 18. Social media use accounts for 1 out of every 5 minutes Americans spend on mobile internet, and accounts for 1 out of every 6 minutes of all internet time. So think about this. If you're at work and you have to be on the internet for your job, in 1 hour of your time, you're spending 10 minutes of it on social media. In 2012, Facebook bought Instagram to appeal to its mobile users, and they paid $1 billion for it, but it really paid off because it's a very popular social media application. Instagram has more than 89 million US users, 600 million worldwide. And the thing about Instagram is that it's only available on a mobile device. You can't like go on your desktop and type in Instagram and go there. It has to be accessed either by a phone or a tablet. Okay, the debate over social media's value. So in your assignment, this is going to be one of your questions, kinds of this. So we're going to talk about presentation of self, and there's 2 models of presentation of self. And then we're going to talk about Facebook depression and envy, which are actual diagnosed illnesses that are in the American Journal of Psychiatry. And then we're going to talk about social isolation. Okay. So when we're talking about presentation of self, we're talking about how you present yourself online. Before we talk about the 2 different models that you can use, we're going to talk about the dual factor model of social media use. This thesis claims that engagement with social media is motivated by 2 basic social needs that every person has. The need to belong. Everyone needs to feel like they belong to some sort of group. And that's why cults become popular and exist, because when someone feels isolated from their family or from friends or from people and feels like no one understands them, they can belong to this kooky group. And then there's also the need for self-presentation. Everyone needs to feel like they can show the world who they are. And there's several different ways we do that. We do that in the way we dress. We do that in how we wear our hair and whether we use makeup. We do that in what kind of shoes we wear. We do that by what kind of cars we drive. There's several ways that we present ourselves, but social media allows us to present the version of ourselves that we want, not necessarily the version of ourselves that we are. So the 2 models of presentation of self we're going to talk about are the idealized virtual identity hypothesis and the extended real life hypothesis. So the idealized virtual identity hypothesis is that social media users tend to show idealized characteristics that do not reflect who they really are. So the idea is that who you are online is not who you are in real life. Some people might try to show that they have more money than they really do, that they're more successful than they really are, that they're having more fun than they're actually having, then their home life is more fulfilling than might really be the case. And there's a little clip, I want to see if it still will take you there. It kind of highlights this.
Jessica.
Katie! Oh God, I summoned it. Hey, sweetie, here you go. I made it from scratch. The soup and the terrine. Yeah, when you didn't post anything last night, I said to the hubs, Katie must be sick. I mean, why else would you not have insted from that party? You know what? I give up. All that stuff I posted on Instagram was just to try to prove to you and to my mother and to myself that I made good choices. But you know what? I guess I didn't. The closest I ever got to the Sex and the City lifestyle was going on one date with a man named Mr. Pig, okay? Are you happy? Katie, nobody's life is perfect. Look at mine. I mean, between taking care of my 3 adorable children, Grayson, Mason, and my unborn gay son, Gason, I barely have time to keep my hair looking like this. Am I at Madonna's birthday party back when she was dating that matador because I smell bullcrap?
You think that this lady is better than you because of her Instagram feed? Okay. This picture of her kids is photoshopped. The shadows are on different sides of everyone's faces.
Nuh-uh. What do you know?
Literally only this. And they didn't take that vacation to Mykonos. She and her husband put their heads through cardboard cutouts at the Jersey Shore. See, the son has cool sunglasses on.
I should have noticed that.
And this marriage has problems.
Okay, let's not bring the hubs into this.
Look behind her hand. It's a knife handle. She photoshopped out the blade. The only way that she could get him to smile in a picture next to her is by holding a knife to his throat.
Oh, God, Jessica, is this true? True? Oh, you think I know what true means anymore? I stare at Instagram for 19 hours a day. Yeah, and you know why I call my husband the hub? It's because when I try to say Kyle, I throw up in my mouth. So are you happy now, Katie? You already have a cool career and an apartment and a village and famous friends. No wonder my mother is jealous of your mother.
Hey, Jessica, comparison is the thief of joy. Do send Barbara my regards. In hell.
So it's kind of an exaggerated model of what the idealized virtual identity hypothesis is, that you're only putting a fictionalized, better version of yourself online. The other model is the extended real life hypothesis, which would say that we use social media to actually communicate our actual identities, our authentic selves. And in reality, I think most people are probably a mix of the two. I think most people try to present themselves and their views as they really are. But, you know, we don't post everything online, at least most people don't. There are people that get on there and post like every bit of drama they have. But I think most people post good things, you know, and like when you take a picture, you might be like, oh, I don't like that picture, I don't look good in that picture. If you don't post that picture, you post a picture that looks good. Or like when I'm trying to take pictures of my kids, I'm like, just stand still for a second so I can get the picture. So we do self-edit a little bit to try to present the best version of ourselves that is, but I don't think most people present a completely alternate persona. But, you know, I'm sure there are some that do that. So I think most people, I'm going to ask you in the homework assignment, which one do you use? Do you use the idealized virtual identity hypothesis or the extended real life hypothesis? And most of you might say it's a little bit of a mix of the two. So Facebook depression and envy. Facebook depression is depression that develops when preteens and teens spend a great deal of time on social media sites such as Facebook and then begin to exhibit classic signs of depression. So this is something that's actually a diagnosis that people can receive, and it's depression, but it's simply one related to Facebook. It tends to affect preteens and teens more than adults because I don't know if you guys remember being preteens, but adolescence is a shit show. It's hard. It is, your body's going through all these crazy changes. It's when social acceptance really becomes critical to you. It's when you kind of break away from your family a little bit and try to form your own social circle with friends and peers. And it's hard just without the added pressure of social media use or internet use. It was hard back in the 80s. But I think it's even harder today because not only do you have to keep this persona up through school, even when you get home, there's no escaping it because then you have to present this model of yourself to Facebook. And so what happens is that some adolescents spend a lot of time on social media sites, probably too much time, and then they begin to exhibit some of the classic signs of depression. And usually it happens when they are not given acceptance by and contact with their peers. And then there's affective forecasting error. Affective forecasting error is when there's a discrepancy between the expected and actual emotions generated by Facebook activity. So an example of that would be, I'm going to post this picture, it's going to get lots of likes, and then I'm going to be happy. And what happens is you post a picture and you don't get any likes or very few likes and then you're sad. Or sometimes it can get so bad that you post a picture, you do get lots of likes, but it still does nothing for you. So you're constantly chasing a feeling of happiness that you can never get. It becomes harder and harder to achieve that. And there have been studies that show that those who use social networking sites do experience a decline in mood. So we're supposed to kind of use social media as a means of escape, and it's supposed to be entertainment, but more people are using it and actually coming away from it in a bad, worse mood than when they started. And I think a lot of it has to do with how social media use has changed. It used to be that we did use social media to post good news and happy things and cute pictures of kids and that your parents could see. Now, something that's been very popular over the last year is that everyone's got to put on their Facebook some political junk. And so automatically, you're alienating half the people probably in your friends list because half of them are going to agree with you and half of them are going to disagree with you, and it gets people pissed off. And then, like, news sites do this quite a bit. They'll post a news story, and then people can comment on it. And if the news story has anything that's even slightly negative about Donald Trump in mid-Missouri, the internet comments go crazy, talking about how that news organization is completely biased and this is all fake news. And I'm assuming some of you are going to go into journalism and be reporters of some sort. I know not everybody that takes this course is, but being a journalist right now is one of the most thankless jobs out there. Everybody hates journalists. First of all the Trump supporters hate journalists because, of course, Trump has done nothing but denigrate the media. And then even people who aren't necessarily Trump supporters think, well, all they ever post is bad news. They never post anything good. And I've always been like, well, because it's the bad news that's different. News is supposed to be stuff that happens that's not normal. It's the, the news isn't like nothing happened today. There were no crashes on the interstate and no one died. That's not news. That's good stuff. It's good information to know, but it's not news. You focus on the negative. That's the whole job. But right now, journalists are really under attack. And it's gone beyond just like being mean to them and posting nasty comments. I mean, literally, they're getting death threats sent to them. They're getting packets of powder sent to them and they don't know what it is. So it's kind of a scary time to be a journalist. But after 1 week away from a social media site, users reported higher levels of satisfaction. They felt happier and less sad and lonely. They were more satisfied with their social lives, and they had less trouble concentrating and were more likely to feel present in the moment. So Facebook envy is similar to Facebook depression, but it's got the jealousy factor to it. So Facebook envy is the resentment of happiness others show on social media. And this affects about as many as 1 in 3 users. And basically it is that we are jealous of what we're seeing. And sometimes we're jealous because it's human nature to be jealous. And you can even be jealous of people that you like. The thing with Facebook and other social media sites is, I don't know about you, but I'm friends with a lot of people on Facebook that I really would never care to see in real life. I have nothing in common with them. We were friends in high school, or maybe just even knew each other in high school, weren't really friends. And a lot of people just add you because they, feel like they need the numbers. And so sometimes you're seeing posts from people that you don't like all that much, how happy they are, and it could piss you off. So Facebook envy affects as many as 1 out of 3 users. Some of the most frequent generators of envy, things that people get jealous of: travel and leisure. So when someone goes on vacation and they're showing posts from their vacation and photos of their hotel room and the resort and the beach. Another generator of envy is social interactions. So when people show themselves out at a party or out at a bar with a group of friends. And then also just general happiness. So you post a photo of yourself smiling and saying that you're happy at the moment. That can cause envy among other people. And then social isolation. So what really is a friend? The average social media user has 350 friends. I don't know that I really actually know 350 people. And I think before social media, people couldn't count, that they had 350 friends. And it used to be a big deal if like you had a wedding and you invited 300 people. That was considered a big wedding. And a lot of those people weren't even your friends. That included family, that included, your parents' co-workers, that included all kinds of people that you don't necessarily consider friends. So are the people that you're friends with online actual friends? What happens is that 18 and 30 to 33-year-olds become more obsessed with these online friends, and they become more detached from traditional social, political, and religious institutions, and they become far less trusting than their seniors. So it used to be that to make friends, you had to like go somewhere and physically interact with someone. Most people made friends at school. But if you were out of school, you might make friends from church, you might make friends at social gatherings, at clubs. Those were the ways you could make friends. My daughter makes new friends every summer when she goes to summer camp, because they just cling on to someone, and then a friendship begins. But now, all the friendships are being built online, and they're getting their need for acceptance and someone to talk to, they're getting that online. So they pull away from like actual social interactions where they could actually meet actual people. And they also become far less trusting of others than like their parents or older generations did. So what studies have shown is that the greater the proportion of face-to-face interaction, the less lonely you are. So you can have a ton of online friends, but people still need that real-life, in-person connection. And the greater the proportion of online interactions, the lonelier you are. And I think that we have seen a rise in the feelings of loneliness and depression, not just from social media use, but now we're in a pandemic. And going out and being with people outside of like your immediate family is dangerous. And we're becoming, super isolated out of necessity. But I think it can be dangerous in the long run. So, users. When we talked about radio and when we talked about television, we talked about audiences. But when it comes to internet, there's not audiences, there's users. And the reason for that is because the internet and social media are interactive. They're not presenting information to attract audience. People are going online and seeking out information. And they're actually communicating back. So if someone posts something on Facebook, if you are friends with them, you can go on there and give them feedback. You can leave a comment. So it's two-way communication, not just one-way communication anymore. And users are often both reading and creating content at the same time. So they might be reading an article online, but at the same time that they're reading an article, they're creating posts or putting videos together or taking pictures. So they're multitasking. Another thing that's becoming popular is MMOs, which are massive multiplayer online role-playing games. So I'm sure you guys have all seen these games, even if you've not played them yourself. You have like Call of Duty, and then there's always like a fantasy game where you're like a wizard or a warlock or an elf or something like that, kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, but online. Yeah. So there's online games where you can go, and there's several things at play there. There's the game itself that you're doing. You're trying to, achieve an objective, but you're also interacting with peers while you're doing that. So there's several different things you're doing at one time. Most people also, when they're using the internet, will have multiple windows open, and they'll just be clicking back and forth between different websites. As far as the number of people who use the internet, there's about 3.7 billion users worldwide, or 51% of the population. But in America, which is an industrialized nation, which tends to have pretty fast internet, most people have access to internet. There's actually been a big government push to make sure that even people in rural areas have access to the internet. 87% of Americans use the internet. And people who use the internet most frequently tend to be women and younger people. So the younger people thing didn't surprise me, because my daughter's on her phone 24 hours a day. The women surprised me, and I had to stop and think, why would women be on the internet more than men? One, it might have to do with the type of jobs that we do. If women are in healthcare fields or teaching fields more, I think that kind of lends itself to being on the internet. I mean, we're on the internet right now with this class. Also, I've noticed even at home, I'm always looking recipes up online, or finding ideas for the kids online, or accessing the kids' school websites to make sure that, I know whether it's a blue or red day, and when picture day is, and when they have to bring something special to class. So more women tend to use the internet than men. So with the advent of the internet, we've really seen a change in the mass communication process. It changed first the definition of the relationship between audiences and industries. So it used to be industry created something, audience looked at it, and that was the end of the communication. If you hated something or loved something, you had to be really motivated to give any kind of feedback. You'd have to go hunt down a phone number for a company, and you couldn't Google it. We didn't have the internet at the time. You have to go on the phone book and look things up and call. So there wasn't a lot of back and forth give and take. But now users can talk back to about any company that they want to. And another thing they can do is a single individual can communicate with as large an audience as a multinational corporation. So a person, if they tweet something or post something, can reach as many people as a company that paid for a 30-second television spot could reach. And of course, the more famous you are, the even wider your reach goes. If Kim Kardashian's gonna post something, she's gonna reach more users than if I post something. And she's kind of an exaggerated version of that, because Kim Kardashian, her reach is so wide that she is a corporation now. She is a company. But it used to be that corporations had the reach because they were the ones that were able to buy ad time on television. They were the ones able to buy newspaper ads. They were the ones who were able to put ads out on the radio. And a corporation is a large, hierarchically structured organization. So it's a large organization, and there's levels. There's people at the top, they can say whatever they want, and there's people at the bottom that don't get to say anything at all without fear of getting fired. But the internet is not like that. With the internet, no one's going to be censoring what you say. So you can say and do whatever you want. Now, I'm not saying there won't be consequences. We have seen plenty of examples of people who have been fired or had their shows canceled or suffered public backlash because of things they post or things they tweet. But there's no one stopping you from doing it. Another change is that the feedback you get online is often immediate and direct. It used to be if you wanted to complain about a television show, like I said, you had to hunt down the phone number, and then you had to call, and usually you'd leave a message with the secretary, and then the secretary would have to pass it on to someone else. Or you could write a letter, and it would take a couple days to get there, and then it would end up in a big pile on someone's desk, and eventually someone might get to it and read it. But online, feedback is often immediate and direct. You can write a comment and post it, and someone can respond immediately to you. Feedback is one of the things that's kind of closest to actual interpersonal communication. Because sometimes feedback can get very direct and very personal. Sometimes if you're posting something, someone can respond to you and be very supportive or very negative and become very mean and kind of direct in their attacks. It's interpersonal communication, but I also think it's heightened interpersonal communication because, you know, if someone's driving down the road and they're waving a Trump flag out their window, you might see them and not approve of it, but not say anything. You know, you're not going to like chase them down in your car and corner them in the parking lot and pull them out of their car and punch them. But,
Every day.
you too, you might be more likely if that person posted a pro-Trump message on their Facebook wall to say something. So it is interpersonal communication, but there's a level of comfort you have both in your physical distance from a person and also the anonymity. Because a lot of people go online and don't use their real names. And they don't use their real identities. We have a group of people who are called digital natives. There are people who have never known a world without the internet. So my kids have had the internet since they've been alive. Most of you are probably digital natives. I do have some older students in my other classes that are, you know, in the 30s that aren't, but most of you probably are. And I think that a lot of times where the conflict comes between like the younger generation and the older generation is that we have to realize we were raised in two very different worlds. The older generation, even when they use the internet, they've known a world without the internet. They've known it before. But this new young generation never has. And I think you can't expect them to grow up with the same set of experiences that the older generation had because it's a completely different landscape now. And then with technology, there's a double edge. There's things that are so much easier now. Communication's easier. You can find the answer to just about any question you have very easily. It has helped you with homework. It's helped you in your job. There's great things that go along with technology. As I said, we're in the midst of a pandemic, but a lot of people can still do their jobs because of technology. They can work from home. They can have Zoom conferences. They can get answers from their boss even if they're not in the office. I love the Howard Stern radio show. None of them is in the studio. They're all at home, but technology has enabled them to continue to produce the show that they produce. But there's also definitely a negative side, and that's like stuff that we've talked about, the Facebook depression, and the Facebook envy, and the social isolation. So, one of the things that's always been a hot topic, and continues to be a hot topic, is the First Amendment. Making the First Amendment's freedom of the press guarantee a reality. The affordability and ease of use make the internet the most democratic media. So not everyone can afford to express their opinions in a newspaper ad. Not everyone can afford to express their feelings on a television commercial. Not everyone can express their feelings on the radio. But what they can do is get on the internet and express themselves. And that freedom from control has become the medium's primary strength. As I said, even though the government doesn't own the airwaves, it does control them. It regulates them. And with the printed press, the government can't control that, but there are things in place like libel laws where you could get in trouble if you just print anything you want. The internet is kind of no man's land. It's kind of the Wild West. There isn't really a lot of control over it. More and more social media companies are trying to limit some expression. When they're putting warnings on there that this information is not verified, or they might block out a picture if they found out it was a fake picture. A lot of times Facebook will take down stuff that's deemed offensive, like if there's nudity, or on YouTube, certain things will get pulled for copyright reasons. So there's trying to exercise some control out of it, but it's so big. There's so much out there, and there's so many users that they cannot catch everything. So freedom from control is great. It makes it strong, but it also comes with a lot of drawbacks to it. Anonymity. Anonymity can be great because it does offer protection. And it does give a voice to those who would otherwise be voiceless. Anonymity is something that's great for like whistleblowers who are exposing corruption in government or corruption in a company or people who report crimes. But with that protection, again, we have a drawback in that people who are anonymous often feel like they have the ability to say anything they want without any kind of repercussion whatsoever. And I would just like to say this because this is something I hear all the time. You have freedom of speech. But do you know what freedom of speech means? What it means is you can say what you want to say and the government cannot put you in jail. That's all it means. It doesn't mean that you are free from any kind of repercussions whatsoever. So you do have freedom of speech, and then other people have the freedom to speak back. And you do have freedom of speech, but that freedom of speech, if you exercise it, might get you fired from your job. And you have freedom of speech, but everyone might hate you. And you have freedom of speech, but you might get an F in school or get an in-school suspension. So freedom of speech does not mean freedom from consequences. And I see this over and over among like people who are old enough to know better. I noticed one woman on Facebook, she's always getting on there and posting pro-Trump messages, right? And then people start attacking her. You know, people are supporting her too, it's about half and half. And then some people attack her. And when people attack her, she's like, well, whatever happened to freedom of speech? I have the right to say anything I want. It's like, yeah, but so do they. It's a two-way street. So all that means is the government won't put you in jail for expressing yourself. But it doesn't mean nothing else bad is ever going to happen to you. So the difficulties of controlling the internet are that there's no central location. There's not like one big switch that controls all the internet. You can't just go like turn it off when things get too heated. You can't be like, okay, everyone needs a timeout. I'm gonna turn it off. Even individual companies don't have that. You know, one switch that powers everything. There is no on-off button. And as I said, that anonymity can be a breeding ground for abuse. People tend to say really hateful and vile things to people if they aren't using their real name and they don't have a picture connected to their username. There is one example I want to give. The people are talking about like hateful things that they've gotten over the internet. And one of the producers of the show I watched said that the comment that he got that still haunts him to this day is he has a brother that died of AIDS. And someone said, I hope your kids get AIDS from your dead gay brother. And it's just like, you would never say that to someone in real life, but the anonymity that the internet provides allows people to feel the freedom to say that. Okay, freedom of the press for whom? As I said, not everyone has access to a newspaper or a television commercial. And the idea was that the freedom of the press was guaranteed only to those who owned one. So only to those who owned a printing press. Yeah, there was freedom of the press for Benjamin Franklin because he had $1 million and had a printing press, but not everyone did. So not everyone was able to express themselves. But now everyone can. And not only do you have now legitimate media companies and legitimate journalists, but you also have less legitimate media sites and less legitimate journalism sites like Breitbart and Newsmax and all these kind of like little independent media companies that think they're real reporters. And also you have citizen journalists now, people who think that, you know, they're not actual reporters employed by anyone, but they think they can expose things. And it sometimes does work. The media will sometimes use like video or pictures that just regular people send them if they caught something on camera. Like when Rodney King was caught on camera getting beat by the police, that wasn't something a journalist caught, that was just a user who found it and turned it into the press. Another thing we're seeing is flash mobs and smart mobs. Flash mobs and smart mobs are geographically dispersed groups connected online only by communications technology, quickly drawn together to perform a collective action. So when we think about flash mobs, a lot of times we think about like those big synchronized dance numbers. People get together and perform a little dance number. But it's not just that. Sometimes it's serious. Sometimes it's a protest. We have seen, Black Lives Matters protests all over the country, and a lot of those were organized by people online and posting the information online of where to go. MoveOn.org is a political website. It's a progressive liberal organization, and a lot of times they will form these flash mobs and smart mobs to take a certain action. It might be signing a petition. It might be go out and vote. It might be get together to protest this action. But it's a legitimate, organization that tries to bring people that are in different areas together for one common goal. And then there's also crowdfunding. That's when you use digital technology to solicit donations from a large number of people for a cause or a project. The most popular crowdfunding source is GoFundMe. And a lot of people set these up when they've been experienced a hardship or tragedy. People get cancer, people get sick, people get in car accidents. There might be a GoFundMe set up for them. But also we've seen people that are like harassed at their jobs or harassed on social media. People will send up GoFundMe sites for them. There was a video that went viral of a barista at Starbucks being harassed by a woman who didn't want to wear a mask. She didn't want to wear a mask. When he told her to wear a mask, she berated him and yelled at him and threatened him and, got all up in his face. And people felt so bad for him that they set up a GoFundMe account and were like, let's send him on a vacation. And like thousands of dollars poured in, and there was enough to send him on like a vacation. So sometimes things like that happen too. All right, we are going to stop there for today. Did anyone have questions about the study guide I handed out in class Tuesday? No? Okay. All right, so we will finish up our lecture on social media next week. I'll post the video so that you can finish it up. I will tell you about your assignment